Railroads. During the mid-19th century, railroads were increasingly becoming the main source of transportation within the United States. However, the expansion of railroads did not come without its downfalls. During the Civil War, the Union depended heavily on railroads to rapidly transport their troops across the country. As a result, there was massive deforestation throughout the United States, and it resulted in a loss of habitat for many organisms. After the Civil War ended, railroad expansion proliferated, especially from 1880 to 1890. During this time period, railroads began to expand into the Great Plains region, which brought new environmental issues. As the Transcontinental Railroad grew, many saw bison as a threat to railroad expansion. Railroads began to advertise hunting by rail, in which they invited people to board these trains and hunt as much bison as they could. In the mid-18th century, approximately 60 million bison roamed the Great Plains. By the end of the 19th century, there were only 300 left. Today, the current situation of railroads is far brighter than it was in the past. Trains have shaped up to become the most energy-efficient motorized mode of transportation. According to the IEA, if all the services carried out by trains were done by planes, cars, and trucks instead, greenhouse gas emissions would be 1.2 billion tons higher each year than they are right now. High-speed rail is one sector that is rapidly expanding at this moment, as countries such as China have made large investments into this green mode of transportation. As the IEA said, if designed with comfort and reliability as key performance criteria, high-speed rail can provide an attractive, low-emission substitute to flying.
Since 1950, air pollution has increasingly posed more of a threat to our environment. This is, not so coincidentally, also the same time commercial flights were becoming popular. Since 2005, aviation has made up a cumulative 4.9% of all greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and non-CO2 effects. Aircrafts flying at high altitudes emit carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, vapor trails, and excessive cloud formations. Due to the emissions from aviation growing faster than any other mode of transport, international nonprofits and the UN had decided to step in. The Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation, or CORSIA, was adopted in October 2016 to prevent nearly 2.5 billion tons of CO2 emissions from reaching the atmosphere. Countries participating in CORSIA plan to achieve their goal in 15 years by flying more efficient aircrafts, investing in emission offsets, using renewable fuels, and new technology. So why is aviation specifically posing such a threat to the environment? Because plane traffic continues around the clock. Gas emissions never get a chance to settle down, and the upper edge of the atmosphere gets seriously and continuously polluted. At high altitudes, greenhouse gases are much more concerning, and they substantially higher the rates of increase in atmospheric and oceanic temperatures.
We often undermine the impact of ships. Cargo transported by the ships represents about 2/3 of the value of total global seaborne trade, equating each year to more than $4 trillion worth of goods. With great power comes great responsibility, but oftentimes that second ideal isn't as prevalent. Before 1972, humans around the world spewed trash, sewage, and chemical, industrial, and radioactive wastes into the ocean with impunity. The London Convention, ratified in 1975 by the United States, was the first international agreement to spell out better protection for the marine environment from ships. The agreement implemented regulatory programs and prohibited the disposal of hazardous materials at sea. An updated agreement, the London Protocol, went into effect in 2006, more specifically banning all wastes and materials except for a short list of items, but both China and India haven't accepted it.
The creation of the modern automobile paved the way for accessible transport, revolutionizing the way we travel. Once cars began gaining traction, many did not stop to think about the environmental impact that the vehicle posed. These earlier cars were very inefficient when it came to fuel, and many were unregulated, leading to a large amount of emissions. The first major action taken against carbon emissions from cars took place in the 1960s as a response to growing smog in the city of Los Angeles. The restrictions on Los Angeles eventually created a chain reaction with many other places around the world passing their own laws regarding emissions. Despite these laws and restrictions against emissions being brought forth, carbon emissions have been steadily going up. Though our cars are now more fuel efficient, there are more cars on the streets now than there were even just 2 decades ago. According to the EPA, in 2018, the average passenger vehicle produced around 4.66 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year, which is a highly alarming number. Despite the number of emissions plateauing in the United States as a result of more fuel-efficient cars, a plateau is not enough, as the amount of emissions every year is still an alarming amount, especially around the world where, according to the World Bank, in highly populated countries such as India and China, automobile emissions are growing at an alarming rate.
The most promising solution to our aviation problem appears to be the use of hydrogen as a renewable energy source. Hydrogen works the same way as other fuels, except when it's burned, it doesn't release any CO2. Hydrogen also happens to be the most abundant element on the planet. It hasn't been used commercially though, because common fossil fuels have been the desirable energy sources as they can power large aircrafts over long distances. But hopefully, sustainable aviation fuels like hydrogen can take the lead in the efforts to reduce aviation emissions internationally.
But what if that doesn't work? Well, there's taxes, regulations, and more taxes. Listen, if we can fight for legislation that pushes taxes on marine fossil fuels, import emissions can be cut significantly. The most comprehensive act addressing ship pollution is the Clean Water Act, but the act specifically allows sewage discharges from cruise ships and other vessels as exempt from this definition. So what can you do? Contact your representatives to improve regulations on the cruise ship industry specific to your area, and we can slowly progress from there.
Another way you can help out the environment is by using electric modes of transportation. One good electric source is trains. According to the IEA, 3/4 of passenger rail transport is on electric trains, making it one of the cleanest modes of transport that you can use. You should also buy electric vehicles instead of gas-powered ones, as many state governments even give incentives and tax credits for purchasing electric vehicles.
And finally, despite the state of our world, there are still ways that you can make an impact in saving our planet. First, you can drive less or often or incorporate walking or biking into your daily schedules. In countries such as the United Kingdom, during their National Walking Month in May, emissions go down greatly. With your cooperation, we can save our planet and make it a better place.